CO, this man needs some help in here. He's about to die. Call 911. Alright, so I wasn't going to do a video today, but I want to try to be consistent with these and get one out, most days. But first of all, welcome back everyone to another episode of Grow With Me, Sawyer P, where we grow together, not apart. And appreciate, I've been getting some subscribers and likes and stuff consistently. While it's not crazy numbers, every little bit counts and helps, and I appreciate y'all that have done that, and I want to thank you all very much, so thank you. But this particular episode, is about an experience I had while in a county jail. A guy, when you first come into a county jail, you're held in, the bullpen or the drunk tanks. They're like temporary housing while they process. You do your fingerprints, take your pictures, do all those initial bookings. They give you like a little ID bracelet. Most jails do, some don't, but they dress you out into your jail uniform, your jumper, or whatever it is they give you there, and all that different good stuff. So a lot of the time, usually in a drunk tank, anywhere from a few hours up to 24, 48 hours. It's usually within a day. You'll sit in there. And a lot of time, if you think you're going to post bail or bonds and get out through a bondsman, or your family's going to come out with the bond money, they'll leave you up there, and give you a little bit of time for, your family to come bail you out. Or if you have money, some jails will let you bond yourself out. If you got like a debit card or cash on you, you can bond yourself out. Not all jails allow that. Sometimes they want you to have a family member or friend or someone on the outside do it. But this particular jail I was in allowed that. So I'm going to, some of the names, time periods, locations have been slightly altered just to protect some people. I don't know. This is, I don't know, I just don't want to get anyone jammed up and anyone get in trouble, so, or put anyone too out there, because, I just don't want to do that. But the events that actually happened in the story are true. So like I said, a few things might be tweaked in the story, but it is based on true events. So, and this occurred here in Alabama. I made parole from Bear Hill Correctional Facility in 2014, parole down here on Interstate Compact. Had 9 months of parole left once I moved down here, which I completed successfully. However, I have had one lapse, and one time I got in trouble down here, which I got, like pretty much a slap on the wrist for, for a possession charge during a lapse, temporary lapse. But that's a whole different story in itself. But this is some of the events that occurred when that happened, shortly, not too long after I moved down here. And after that, I kind of started doing well and everything, But anyway, so this county jail, it's not the county I live in, but it's in a county jail local to me within, a few counties in the surrounding area. Like I said, I probably shouldn't say the specific one, but it was in one of the surrounding counties. I was doing some work in that particular day, and I was using and got pulled over, and there was things in plain sight the officer could see, which gave them probable cause to search, and they found stuff in the car that wasn't supposed to be in there, and I got locked up. This time I bonded out within 24 hours, so I didn't sit long. I bonded myself out with my debit card. So while I was in there, shortly after getting in there, this all happened, early afternoon-ish. Early in the day, 1 or 2, I got picked up, got booked in the jail around 3, something like that. But I had to stay there overnight. If you're drunk or you're high, you have to wait till you sober up before they can release you, because, I guess apparently people have gotten released and sometimes people don't have a ride. They'll be walking down the road and they're stumbling around and have got hit by cars, or bad things have happened. And that could lead to a lawsuit on the jail. So they wait till usually at least like 12 hours, sometimes a little longer, depending on how drunk or high you are, to sober up before they let you out. So I was kind of going through that period of where I had to sit and wait before I was going to bomb myself out, but I had to wait until I sobered up. And later on that evening, probably around 7-ish p.m., 3 guys come in, 3 black dudes. Not that their ethnicity matters or anything, but 3 black guys come in. We'll say one's name's Brandon, one's name's Yogi, and one's name is who was the other guy? And we'll say John. I don't know. So we're sitting in the cell. They all had nicknames and so forth, but we're sitting in the cell, and mind you, these are the drunk tanks. They're waiting for me to sober up. These guys got caught. They got charged with drug trafficking, attempting to elude police. Apparently, they were on their way to meet up with a guy to sell them some meth. And these guys had some weight on them. They had a couple ounces. Some of it was, I think they were going to rip this dude off because some of what they had was fake. I've heard that there's some kind of chemical that they give to livestock. I cannot remember the name of it for the life of me. But it looks if you set it next to meth, it looks identical to it. If you got them side by side, it looks crystally and like shards, just like ice would, And these guys, they were supposed to go meet with a guy and sell him some dope. And along their way, the guy apparently was a snitch from my understanding of the story. I talked to these guys a little bit. And I think he tipped the police off that they were riding around with dope, and they ended up getting pulled over, and they ran. They ran when the cops first hit the lights, the blue lights on their cop car. They took off on them and tried to elude and get away, and they threw some dope out the window, which they ended up finding. They had to backtrack, and they found a little pouch on the side of the road full of a couple ounces of meth and a little bit of fake dope, too. So these guys get charged with trafficking, possession, attempt to elude, like drug paraphernalia, maybe another charge. I can't remember. These guys used meth too. I wouldn't have thought these guys to be the meth user types because they a lot of those, the black guys, they're more about getting money and not using those hard drugs and stuff like that. And, they had a little bit of size to them. I wouldn't have thought they were strung out on meth, but I think they had all done some prison time prior to this, you know what I mean? So a lot of those guys get big in there, and, they still had a little bit of that from their last term. I don't think they were out long, all 3 of them. So at first they separate them all and put them in separate cells because I think they were trying to pull them out and interview them one by one to get them to tell on each other, which they didn't. I think one of them ended up, one of them, Yogi, that's a different name. Allegedly, from what I heard, he had told, on the other 2 in those statements. That's what I heard. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's what the other 2 said. And was trying to say it was their dope and not his. But anyways, they all got charged with the same charges. And some of them were on probation, parole. They violated their probation, community corrections, all that stuff. So first we were all in cells together, or separate cells. One of them was in a cell with me. The Brandon kid was in a cell with me. But later on that evening, later at night, probably around 10 o'clock, they brought a whole bunch of guys in from the general housing area, like the regular dorms. They brought in probably 10, 11, 12 guys that the next morning were going to prison. They go to Kilby Correctional Facility, which is down near Montgomery, I believe. And that's like the reception center for Alabama. Guys get processed and all that good stuff, and fingerprinted and their head shaved. Kind of like how I talked about Elmira, New York. This is Alabama's version of that, the intake facility. A lot of those guys the next morning, like early in the morning, they usually do it at like 5 in the morning, I guess it's safer to transport a bunch of inmates early in the morning like that. So they come down, they sleep the night in those cells, and then early in the morning they shackle them up in chains and all that stuff, put them on a van, take them to Montgomery. So because of all those guys being brought into the booking area where we were at, they had to force all us other guys into a cell together. So Brandon, Yogi, and John, Brandon, Yogi, and John, they all got thrown in the cell with me. And there was like two other, I think it was just one other guy, another white guy in there. He had like some silly charge, like, I don't know, something silly. He was in there for some very minor. He was probably going to get out the next day. A very small misdemeanor offense. I can't remember what it was, but it was very petty. He shouldn't probably even have been in jail. So we all get thrown in the cell together. And initially, when they get in there, they start arguing with each other. Like, they're like, yo, you should have claimed your shit. Like, one dude was mad at the other dude because, like, instead of claiming his shit, he just pretended like it wasn't his. And then everyone got charged for it because one of the dudes didn't claim it was theirs. And they, I thought they were about to fight, actually, And they moved us all into that same cell within an hour of them showing up. When they booked them in, a whole bunch of cops came in there. It was like a big deal for them. This was like a big bust. They were super happy about it, You could tell when they came in and brought the guys in, they were super excited. They busted these guys. Which these guys I don't think had the best reputation in the community, so they were happy to get them off the street. And trafficking here in Alabama, I believe, is a Class A felony, and they all had like $105,000 bonds. So I know they're still sitting in there. Unless you got at least 10 grand to get a bondsman, a bondsman, you have to pay them 10% of your bond. So if you have $1,000 bond, you got to pay $100. If you got a $5,000 bond, you got to pay $500. $100,000 in their case is 10 grand. And none of those dudes I don't think their family had money like that to get them out, So they sat, and then they ended up violating their probation, so they couldn't get out anyways. It would have been pointless bonding out unless they bonded out that day and just ran. That would have been they could have bonded out, but they would have had to do it quickly before those probation detainers got issued. But they didn't. They're all sitting there still because the bail was so high. But anyways, so they put them in the cell. They're all arguing. We should have, tucked it between your cheeks or whatever, swallowed it, blah, blah, blah. Lo and behold, one of them, they all had their own little stash, but one of them did swallow, I don't know if he swallowed all of it, but he swallowed a portion of his dope. And, the CO is actually, when they put him in the cell, they're like, how much did you swallow, Yogi? It was the Yogi dude. Yogi. They're like, yo, how much did you swallow, Yogi? He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't swallow nothing. And when they came in, they seemed all a little jittery and talkative. You could tell they'd been using, meth is crystal meth is an upper stimulant type of drug, but nothing too crazy. Seemed a little jittery and whatnot. But as time went on, they started off arguing, and then they just finally all went quiet. And it was a little bit awkward in there, a little tense, because you could tell some of them were upset with each other. And at one point, I thought two of the particular ones were about to go at it against each other because they were kind of mouthing back and forth. But it kind of deaded, and they chilled out. But that was Brandon and John going back and forth. Yogi's kind of over there just tweaking, So time passes. Mind you, I at this time had been using a strong opioid, not happy about it, but it's heroin. These days, at this point in time, this is a lot when the fentanyl was being put in the dope. And, I'm pretty sure some of the stuff I had fent in it. So I knew if I stayed in there, I was going to go through some bad withdrawals. So I was trying to bond out as quickly as possible because I wasn't trying to go through withdrawals in that jail, Which I ultimately ended up cleaning up and getting clean and getting my life together. And they gave me I ended up getting 6 months of pretty much kind of like probation. It was I had to pee in a couple times a month, go to a few AA meetings, nothing serious, And they dropped it to a misdemeanor, But anyways, these guys, like I say, Yogi's kind of over there, he's a little jittery and twitchy and whatnot, but He's not talking much. He's pretty quiet, looking around the room. You can kind of see his eyes doing this. But as time goes on, I see his knee kind of bouncing. I'm like, is this guy going through withdrawals already? You know, I notice he's sweating. He's kind of like moving back and forth, doing this. And we'll come to find out, he swallowed a pretty significant amount of dope. I'm sure he swallowed at least a couple of grams. Based off the way he was acting, at least a gram. Well, I'll continue with the story. I'll touch back a little bit on how much I think it was. But the dude, we're sitting in the cell and he's sweating. He's wearing a real baggy pants and his belt's real loose and his pants keep falling down. And mind you, these cells, there's just concrete slabs. Instead of like a metal bench or a wooden bench, it's just a big concrete slab we sit on. That's like your bench. And it's so cold in there. You know, those cells, they're freezing in there. They don't give you even if you spend the night down there, some jails, they give you a blanket and like a mat. Not this jail. You're not getting nothing. You're sleeping on that concrete if you can sleep. You're lucky if you can get a roll of toilet paper to rest your head on as a pillow. Or if they don't change you out right away, sometimes you can like take your hoodie off, and sometimes they take your hoodie for you if you got a shirt under. It just depends on the officer. But you're fortunate if you got a hoodie, you can fold it up and use it as a pillow or whatever. But it gets super cold in there. Something about sitting on that concrete and laying on it, especially if you got like sleeveless shirts and shorts, your skin and your body being in contact with that concrete long enough, it just sucks the heat out of your body. You know, it just makes you so cold. It's so cold. They say the inside of those cells are the same temperature as it is out at the desk where the CO is processing everyone, which it probably is, but something about that concrete just sucks the heat out of your body. It makes you so cold. You know, mind you, I'm starting to go into withdrawals, kind of more mild withdrawals that hadn't enough time passed. You know, by the time I finally bailed out the next morning, I was like going through pretty much almost full-blown withdrawals. Darn near, not quite, but almost was at that point. I was going through withdrawal for sure. But anyways, back to the story. So Yogi, he's kind of doing this number. His pants are falling down. And the reason why I mentioned the cold part of the story, he's sweating profusely, which if you've ever sweat, say you play basketball or you play a sport or you jog and you get all sweaty and then you stop and it's kind of cold out, that cold air kind of hits your skin and where you've been wet from sweating, it makes you so much colder. You might have been hot while you were running or playing basketball or football or soccer or whatever, but when you stop and that air hits you, it gets really cold, you know? And you would think, man, where he's sitting on this concrete, he's sweating from all the dope he had swallowed, which we found out later on was fentanyl and meth. He sweating profusely. He was overdosing, you know? And his pants are falling down. And the CO every so often he's peeking in there and he's seeing them kind of acting funny, but they're used to seeing people coming in there on drugs. And he opens the door, he says, "Yo, Yogi." He's like, "Pull your damn pants up, man." You know, because he's sitting there in his boxers with his pants around his ankles. And he's so out of it, he don't even realize it. Plus, he's so hot, it probably feels good sitting in his boxers with his legs and butt touched in that cold concrete slab, you know. To him, it probably feels good. He's like, "Man, it's hot as hell in here, man." Or no, they're like, "Why are you sweating so much?" He's like, "Man, it's hot as hell in here." He just had this crazed look in his face, man. Just crazed look in his face, man. And he pulls his pants up, tightens his belt. And later on, COs walk away. You know, there's a little bit of look of concern in the CO's eye. But at that point, they weren't really fooling with him too much. And later on, he pulls his shirt off. He's just got a t-shirt. I takes it off, so he's shirtless. And he's laying up. There's a bench. You know, John's sitting here. Yogi was sitting here, and this is where the bench ends. He had his back laying on it and his legs like this. So his legs were kind of, his feet were on the floor, but his back was laying back on the concrete slab like this. His shirt's off. He's sweating profusely. And like I said, that concrete, normally you'd be freezing. Everybody else in that cell had their shirt, you know, their arms in their shirt like this, freezing to death, you know. Bundled, you know, we were all cold. And he's sitting there convulsing. He'll sit up for a minute. he'll come to. His pants keep falling down around his ankles. He's almost naked. He's in his boxers. At one point, he pulls his pants all the way off. He's just sitting in there in his boxers, just convulsing, And every so often, you see him. He'll kind of sit up on the bench for a second. He'll be doing this. Like it's like he thinks he's still out in the free world, out there hustling. He's driving his car 1 second, he'll be doing this. The next minute he's adjusting his radio. The next minute he's pouring some dope in a bag, then tying the bag up. 1 minute he's doing this, which is like, if you smoke meth, you have to. There's like those. It's like a ball with a tube coming off of it. I've never was into meth, but they spin it while they hit it. He's doing it, he's striking a lighter, like he's lighting a cigarette. He's doing all these little hand motions like he thinks he's still out there doing these things. And it was just blew my mind, man. Like this dude was losing it, and he's just got this sweat, drenched in sweat, shirtless, short, pantless. You're not supposed to take your clothes off. And they're sitting in his boxers, sweating profusely. And like I said, this concrete's so cold, he should have been freezing. The SEALs, they come back every so often, they see him doing all this, and like you can see the look in their face. You kind of see a look of like concern. Usually SEALs don't care about you, but this one particular SEAL was, he was a decent, some SEALs are horrible, bad people, but there are good ones too. He had that look of concern, like, damn, man. And it just kept escalating, man. There were times he would kind of fall out and come to and start tying, convulsing, bro, shaking, laying down, and he'll kind of chill for a second. It was like it came in waves, and then he would start bugging out again. He wasn't talking, staring off, like, and his boys, like, I'm looking at them like, yo, is he going through withdrawals? Like, what happened, man? You all right? Like, you swallowed some dope, and they're just like, I don't know. They didn't want to, like, if they said anything, they thought maybe they'd be telling on him. They're like, I don't think he's going through withdrawals. But every so often, they're like, yo, Yogi, hey, yo. I'm like, you good? At first, he didn't even acknowledge them talking to him. He's doing this. And like, yo, Yogi. And finally, he's like, Yogi, you good? Yeah. He's clearly not good. He's clearly not. This man looks like he might die, seriously. And I had enough, man. Normally in jail, you're supposed to mind your own business. The CO knew what was going on. Everyone knew what was going on. You know what I mean? And the CO was doing his, every so often they walked past the cells. Or he was talking to the one CO. I'm like, yo. He was talking to an inmate in the tank next to us. I'm like, yo, man, I think this dude needs some help. I don't want to see this man die. While you're supposed to mind your business in there, like, I don't want to see someone die and that be on my conscience, knowing that I could have done something about it to help maybe potentially save this man's life. I'm like, this dude's not good, man. I told him through the crack of the door, like, he probably needs some help. And he stops and he looks through the window. He's watching him. The Yogi doesn't even realize what's going on. He's still sitting there tying up bags, hitting his pipe and turning the radio and doing all these little things with his hands, sweating, tremoring, shaking, twitching, sweating. At this point, they're not, his clothes are still off. They're not really yelling at him because they know he's out of it, you know what I mean? And he went away for a moment. He pulled the other two guys out, Brandon and John. He pulled them out one at a time, called them to the office. And he asked them, what did he take? And they weren't going to tell on him because they didn't want him to catch a new charge. Like, they might have thought he might have got charged with introducing contraband, which, as long as they don't find dope, you're not going to get charged with that. But, they were still trying to keep to the code and whatnot, even though it was obvious the man was overdosing. And, they interviewed them one by one, and they said, I don't know. They just said, I don't know. He was good when we came in. I didn't see him take anything, Finally, CO comes back around. He's like, Yogi, put your clothes on. He's like, let's go. And they took him to the hospital, man. And he ended up, surprisingly enough, I don't know what they did at the hospital, if they pumped his stomach or what, if they gave him something to reverse, Narcan or something like that. But they did blood work on him. He had fentanyl and meth in his system. They drew his blood. You could see the little, thing on his vein there where they pricked him, like the Band-Aid thing with the gauze. And they did blood work on him, and he had meth and fentanyl in his system. They probably hit him with some Narcan, I'm sure, but meth, you got to kind of let it ride its course. I don't know if there's a way to reverse methamphetamine, but from my understanding, you just kind of got to let it work its way out of the system. And when he pulled him out of the cell, he could barely stand up. He almost fell at one point and grabbed the desk and put his other hand on the cop's shoulder. And like, normally you're not supposed to touch the police. But like, the cop just knew he was so out of it. He knew that he wasn't trying to be like physical with it. He just almost fell. He could barely walk. And the cop had to like hook his arm underneath the dude's armpit and like kind of walk him slowly to the cop car out in the there's like a garage, like a Sally Port garage. When they bring everyone in that's getting arrested, they put some cuffs on them and took him out. And like shortly before I made bond the next morning, around like 7 a.m., he came back, and he was still shaking, trembling, twitching. This is several hours later, at least 8 hours later after he initially started bugging out, and he's still twitching. But it wasn't quite as bad, you know what I mean? But, I don't feel bad that I interfered and told, the police he needed help. I didn't tell him he was on something. I said, something's wrong with him. He needs help. That's all I said, And I left it at that and left it to the cop to make their decision. Because I don't want that, like I said, on my conscience. A man dying when I could have potentially said something and, his life be saved, So he, fortunately made it, he made it through, man. But it was just crazy. And, you hear stories all the time. People overdosed on Flocka, which is alpha PVP. There's this stuff called no-show, which is supposed to mimic synthetic. It's supposed to be a synthetic cannabinoid or synthetic marijuana. Fentanyl getting in. People are overdosing left and right in these prisons. A lot of the time, the guards are the ones bringing it in and being paid by the inmates' families or through Cashapp, And it's awful, man. The drug game is bad news. And if there's any takeaway, that's something I want to start doing at the end of these videos is don't do drugs. Don't do drugs. You might think that you're stronger than the drug. Any young person or anyone that's not experienced with drugs, you start off, you see your friends doing it, it looks like it's fun and it feels good and it makes you feel great and happy. In the beginning, it is fun. I'll keep it 100. When you first start doing drugs or drinking, it is fun. You have a good time usually, as long as you don't take too much or whatever. Sometimes it is fun. But eventually, you tell yourself, I can control it. I'm never going to let this substance control me. Before long, you start wanting it every day. And you start craving it hard. And then that craving turns into a need, especially things like opiates, alcohol, benzos like Xanax and Valium and Klonopin. Certain drugs, you become dependent. If you don't got it, you get extremely sick. And some you can even die. Like alcohol and Xanax, benzos and alcohol, you can die. And in rare cases, even with stuff like heroin and fentanyl, you can get super dehydrated and die that way. It's rare, but it has happened in some prisons and jails before. It does happen on occasions. Like I said, it's more rare than alcohol and benzos, but it does happen. But the takeaway, they say with addiction, addiction is giving away everything for one thing, but recovery and living your life the right way is giving away one thing for everything. So take that in for a moment, Addiction is giving away everything, your money, your house, your wife, your family, and chasing that drug, you're giving away everything. You lose everything over time, and that becomes your number one focus because you have to have it. You give away everything for one thing, but recovery and having a good life is giving away one thing, that one thing being that drug for everything. You get your life back, you get your health back, you get your family. A lot of times you can get your family back, your money back, your house back, living, food, things that you need. You start feeling better about yourself. You start feeling positive, and like life can be good again, So stay away from hard drugs. Stay away from drugs, period. It's not worth it, and it'll end you up in places like jail and prison. They say jails, institutions of death. Jails, prisons, psych wards, rehabs, halfway houses, detox, or in the ground. A casket in the ground, or being cremated into an urn. And so many of my friends have passed from these, especially nowadays with fentanyl. So many of my friends I grew up with are dead now. It's no joke. It's not worth it. So that's the takeaway from this, Be careful and mind your association. Be careful who you deal with and talk to and associate with, because some people ain't your friend. They're there when times are good, but whenever the going gets rough, they're nowhere to be found. They're not true friends. They're just there for a good time. So make true friends, make true good associations. Stay away from the bad ones, you know. And if they are good people at heart, but they're just strung out on dope, you can love them. They call what's called loving them from a distance. You know, say your brother. You know he's a good person, but when he's on drugs, he starts doing bad things, stealing and lying and all that. You can love them and try to support them from a distance, but until they decide to change, you got to keep your distance from them, because being around them is not good for you and can drag you down as well. It can take you down with them, you know. Dirty rubs off on clean, but clean don't rub off on dirty. You ever have a rag that's covered in mud and you put it next to a clean rag? What happens? The dirt gets on the clean rag. The clean rag doesn't, you can't wipe clean off on dirt. You know what I'm saying? That if you touch that clean rag to that dirty rag, even though you might want to try to rescue a person, you can't help a person until they want to save themselves. So that white rag, you're not gonna polish them up and clean them up. They're gonna get you dirty and drag you down. So, you know, hopefully that's a good takeaway from this. But I need to get cleaned up and get to bed. I got to work tomorrow. But I love you guys. If you enjoyed this, please consider liking, subscribing, hitting the notification bell, maybe following me on social media, or, you know, if you're feeling generous, maybe a Cashapp. I don't need that, and if you don't want to do that, that's fine. But I put it under there because who knows, you know. But I love you guys. I appreciate you guys for watching. And let's grow this channel together. Share with a friend. I love you guys. Thanks for watching. Grow with me, SawyerP. Y'all have a good night. Take care.